guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. If you can hear any background noise in today's video, I don't really know what's going on, but there seems to be a lot of commotion on my street right now. There was somebody hammering for like an hour and I was waiting and waiting and finally they stopped. But now it sounds like there is a huge truck outside. So I'm not really sure what's going on, but if you can hear a little bit of background noise, I do apologize, but this is the only time that I have to film this video. However, you guys usually say that you can't hear the sounds that I'm apologizing for, so hopefully that's the case in today's video as well. But with that all out of the way, let's get right into today's video. The case that we are going to be talking about today is one that I have been actually sitting on for quite a while, and the reason that I never uploaded it when I planned to is because it was way back in October when I had just gotten my wisdom teeth done and I wasn't able to make videos, and so I kind of just kept this case and I was waiting for the right time to do it. I was thinking maybe next Halloween since I didn't get to do it last Halloween. However, then one of you requested this video, and because I already had the research done, I thought now would be the perfect time to talk about it. So today we are going to be talking about the legend of the Bell Witch. This story starts in 1804 and is based around John Bell and his family. They had just moved to what is now known as Adams, Tennessee, and they were settling on about 350 acres of land. However, at the time it was not Adams, Tennessee, it was called Red River, Tennessee. So before we really get into today's case, I do just want to mention that although this story is said to be true, or at least a little bit true, because it happened so long ago in the early 1800s, there are a lot of different variations of this story because information obviously from way back then gets lost in translation, so it's not all factual and there is nothing to verify some of the things that took place. So there are several different variations of this story. I'm just telling the one that I came across and I thought kind of seemed to be more legit. However, if I do miss something or I'm leaving something out that you find is very important, or you think there's a different variation of this story that is more true, feel free to leave it in the comments down below so that we can all be on the same page. So again, this story really started in 1804 when John Bell, his wife Lucy Bell, and 10 other families decided to move from South Carolina to Tennessee. Now, unlike today, it isn't so easy to move from one place to another way back then. Obviously, it was a very long time, it was a really big process, but John Bell and his wife Lucy did this very successfully, and I believe so did the other 10 families. And once the Bells were kind of settled in their new property and in their new life, that is when they started to have children, and I believe that they went on to have 6 kids in total. Again, once the Bell family had moved to Tennessee, John and Lucy had really good luck. They ended up settling on about 350 acres of land. The house that they built was very nice for that time. They were pretty happy. They were well known in the community because John's farming skills were just insanely amazing. They were really, really successful and they had absolutely everything going for them. So obviously because of this, they were just generally very happy. There was another family who moved to Tennessee along with the Bell family, however, and they were the Batts family, and unfortunately they were not having the same kind of luck that John Bell and his wife Lucy were having. The Batts family had moved to Tennessee in hopes of running a farm and also becoming very successful, but unfortunately in 1816, Frederick, who was the head of the household, ended up having a very, very bad accident while working on his farm. And unfortunately, this accident would physically disable him, and he was no longer able to do any work on his farm, and he was the breadwinner for the family, so this put the family in a very, very bad financial state because there was really no money coming in for them at that time. Because of their financial state, the Batts family was forced to sell their land, and John Bell was the first person to show interest, and he ended up buying the land. However, this caused a huge issue. Because the Batts family needed money so badly, it is said that John Bell took advantage of this and he bought their land for an extremely low price. And when Frederick's wife Kate found out how much John had bought this property for, she was absolutely furious. So now that I've mentioned Kate Batts, let's talk about her for just a minute. So Kate was said to be an absolutely horrible woman. She was always very angry and loud and rude, and many people believed that she had practiced or been practicing witchcraft, and that her husband Frederick's accident was God getting her back for practicing all these evil things that she was now putting into the world. So Kate just had this really bad reputation. People really tried to stay clear of her because she was so rude and horrible, and again, they believed that she was a witch. So at this point, the Batts family was so angry with the Bell family, and so I'm not really sure how this next part came about. However, a little while after buying the land off of Frederick and Kate, John Bell then went to Frederick's brother Ben, and he bought a little slave girl off of him. But the slave girl was very, very young, and John Bell didn't think that she was old enough to be away from her mother, so he just said, you know, I'll pay for her now, you keep her, and I'll come back to get her when she's a little bit older. However, when John Bell came back to get the girl, Ben changed his mind and he said, you know, she's older now, she's a really good worker, and I think that she's worth more money than you had originally paid me. The two men started to converse back and forth, and somehow John Bell ended up conning Ben Batts into buying the slave girl off of him for more money than he had originally paid for her. So now the Batts family was just absolutely done. They were so angry with John Bell because now it had seemed that he had taken advantage of the family's financial state twice. And so because of this, Ben had decided to file a lawsuit against John Bell for extortion. However, John Bell was not aware that he had filed a lawsuit against him, and so because of this, he never showed up to any of his court dates, and so the court ended up siding with the Batts family. And once news started spreading about how the Bell family had taken advantage of this family in financial trouble, and how John Bell didn't show up to the court dates and all of those kinds of things, that is when the Bells' reputation started to severely drop. So now let's get into some of the juicy stuff. So in 1817, after the Bell family had kind of been boycotted by the rest of the community, John Bell was out on his property hunting, and that is when he ran into an absolutely terrifying creature. He said that this creature was covered in thick black hair and that it had the head of a rabbit and the body of a large dog. It was growling at him and it seemed to be very, very vicious, and so because John Bell was out hunting, he decided to shoot this creature. However, after he had shot it, when he walked in the direction to see if the creature was injured or what was going on or what exactly this creature was, the creature was absolutely nowhere to be seen. So John Bell was kind of thinking at this time that his mind was probably playing tricks on him, and so because of that, he decided it would be best to kind of keep this sighting to himself and not tell anybody about it. However, this would be what really kicked off the haunting of the Bell farm. The night after John Bell had seen that creature, he was now inside of his home with his family, his wife, and his children, when all of them started to hear a repeated sound of what sounded like somebody throwing rocks at the outside of the home. This kind of worried the family a little bit, and so John and his oldest son went out several times to see if they could find the source of the sound. However, every single time they went outside, there was absolutely nothing there. This ended up going on for several nights, and the family started to chalk this up to work of the Batts family, trying to get them back for, I guess, taking advantage of them. However, this theory was quickly dismissed when they started to hear those sounds from within the household. It all started off within the home by the family just hearing very strange noises coming from inside of the house. They heard strange creatures scratching at the wall and making these growling noises and just absolutely terrifying sounds. They heard what they thought were rats gnawing at the furniture. However, they could never locate any of these rats, and all of this activity was going on at all hours of the night, all hours of the day, and because of this is what really started to put the family in distress because they were losing a lot of sleep, but that was just the start, and this haunting would grow to get much, much worse. That is when the Bell family would start to be physically attacked by this spirit. The first attack was taken out on the Bells' 14-year-old daughter, Betsy. She was in bed one night when she was awoken by a very strange sound, which was a regular occurrence now, but on this particular night she had decided to get out of bed and go try and see if she could locate where the sound was coming from. But when she went to get out of bed, that is when she found that her hair had been tied into knots around the bedpost. When she went to get up, that is when she started feeling an invisible spirit slapping her across the face several times. She started to scream, and that is when John and Lucy Bell came into the room, and they said that when they entered the room, they could see that their daughter's face was bright red and she had welts all over her face that were in the print of a hand. This obviously absolutely terrified the entire family. However, this would not be an isolated incident. Following the attack that Betsy was under, it started happening more frequently that the other children would run into their parents' rooms at all hours of the night, saying that they'd been attacked by an invisible spirit, and they would show their parents where they were hit, and there would sure enough be a handprint-shaped bruise or welt in that area. At first, the parents weren't really bothered, but John Bell quickly became the kind of like target of this haunting. John Bell, along with the children, were being very violently attacked, and they were starting to show signs of this. They had bruises all over their bodies, they were extremely stressed out, they were losing sleep, and so this was getting pretty serious. And so because of that, the family was trying to figure out what to do, but because their reputation in the community had declined so much, they didn't want to ask anybody for help because they didn't want the news to get out about this, because they didn't want it to diminish their reputation even more than it already was. And so in order to deal with this all, they just decided to pray more. But once the family started praying more frequently, that just caused the haunting to get much worse. Now, not only were the Bell family experiencing all of this paranormal activity, but their slaves would also come to them saying that they seen strange animals all over the property, and that many of these animals could speak. The activity just kept escalating and escalating until it was way too much for the family to handle. And so at this point, John Bell decided to reach out to his friend James Johnson. Now, I'm not completely sure, but I do believe that James Johnson had some kind of strong religious background, and that is why John Bell decided to reach out to him. So after John had reached out to James, James agreed to come over, so him and his wife came over to the Bell house, and they all began to pray to kind of rid the house of these evil spirits that were haunting it. So on this occasion, when John had come over and was praying with the Bells and his wife, he had allegedly asked the spirit its name, and that is when the spirit had replied to him saying Kate, as in Kate Batts, who was a witch in the community who hated the Bell family. However, even with all this praying and John inviting over James and his wife, and they all praying together, it really didn't help, and it just continued to get worse and worse and worse, so much to the point that James had told John that he needed to kind of reach out to the community and ask for their help, because this was way too much for him to handle by himself. And so John did take that advice. He reached out to the community, and the news of the haunting at the Bell farm quickly spread absolutely everywhere. It wasn't just known in the community where they lived, but it was also known in all of the surrounding areas, and many people were very, very interested in this, and many people were coming from all over the place to visit the Bell farm. So the way that this story goes is at this time the ghost started to become a lot more violent, and she started to become very loud. You could hear her voice at all times in the Bell home. It was pretty much just booming all of the time. And again, this news was spreading pretty quickly because this was a really interesting case. But it was spreading so quickly that it had actually reached the ears of Andrew Jackson. He at the time was just an army general, but he would later go on to be a president of the United States. So after he heard about the haunting of the Bell farm, he gathered up some of his men and they all got into a wagon and headed in that direction for the farm. Once they reached the property, this is when they had allegedly had paranormal activity before even getting into the home. They were in their wagon, and when they hit the property, the wagon completely stopped moving and would not go anymore for no apparent reason. Allegedly, then Andrew Jackson got out of the wagon and he went outside and started to kind of apologize to the spirit, and just like that, then the wagon started to work again. Andrew Jackson and his men were allegedly supposed to spend several nights at the Bell farm. However, they were completely done with this place after just one, assuming that they had had enough paranormal activity in one night than they ever wanted to experience again. During this entire time, it kind of seemed like John Bell was the main target of this haunting, with Betsy Bell following behind as she was the first target in the first attack and that kind of stuff. But John Bell was severely being affected by this ghost. His mental health was declining severely and he was just having a lot of issues because of this haunting. Lucy, his wife, however, didn't experience the same kind of deal with the ghost. Lucy had fallen, really ill, almost deathly ill, and she was completely bedridden. And she claims that while she was bedridden, Kate, the ghost, who was also a witch in the community, had stayed at her bedside and taken care of her. And Lucy ended up getting better, and she actually said that she believes that if Kate wasn't there taking care of her, she would have never recovered from this illness. John Bell, on the other hand, was not so lucky, and on December 20th, that is when he was found deceased in his bed. When they found him deceased, they also found a vial on the floor beside his bed that had a foggy, unknown liquid inside of it, and it was giving off a very chemically smell, and this chemically smell was also coming from John's mouth. So this kind of led people to believe that John had drank whatever this liquid was. Police were called to the scene to investigate this murder, and that is when they started to speculate that maybe Lucy Bell had murdered her husband. However, allegedly when this was vocalized, you could loudly hear Kate say that Lucy had nothing to do with this and that she had distributed the poison to John Bell. Kate had distributed the poison to John Bell the night that he had passed away. And because of this, the death of John Bell was completely chalked up to a spirit, and they blamed this spirit, Kate, for John's death. However, the family thought that after he had passed away, this spirit would kind of leave them alone, but she did have one more last hurrah when she showed up to the funeral service and just kind of mocked the family. But after this, the family thought that they were completely done with the spirit. She got what she wanted, John had passed away, and that she would just leave them alone, but she would make one more visit. The last time that the spirit of Kate would ever make contact with anybody from the Bell family was when Betsy Bell was said to be engaged to a man by the name of Joshua Gardner. The spirit appeared to Betsy and told her that she cannot go through with the engagement, and this must have been a very traumatizing experience because Betsy ended up calling the engagement off, and Joshua moved away, cutting off all contact with the Bell family. And that was the last time the spirit of Kate was ever seen by any of the Bells. Betsy went on to marry a man by the name of Richard Powell, and the couple went on to have several children, and Kate clearly didn't have a problem with this because she never showed up again. She never interfered with the couple's marriage or anything like that. She just didn't want Betsy to marry the first guy who had proposed to her. Now, what really has me confused in this case is whether or not Kate Batts was alive during the time of this haunting. If you look through the records, it does say that she was alive during some of the time that this haunting had taken place. So was it her spirit that was haunting the Bell farm, or had she done some kind of magic spell and allowed herself to haunt the home while she was still alive? I'm not really sure how that all works. I know nothing about witchcraft or anything about that kind of stuff. So I'm not really sure how that would have happened, but I just thought that that was a little bit strange because ghosts usually are deceased people. But yeah, I just thought that was a little bit interesting. I do also just want to look at a kind of like different side of this haunting. Some people believe that this was a very fabricated plan to just murder John Bell. So Lucy Bell, who was John Bell's wife, was actually closely related to Kate Batts. Kate Batts' dad was Lucy's sister, meaning that Lucy was Kate Batts' aunt. So they were family, and some people believe that because of this, the two women were in on this together and they made up all this entire plan to murder John Bell. People who believe that theory also believe Richard Powell, who was Betsy's husband, who was a very, very well-educated man, kind of embellished this story a little bit, and that caused a little bit of mass hysteria in the community. The The people who live in Adam, Tennessee, in that general area, still report that the paranormal activity in that area is quite high. The Bell House no longer exists, and it has been since torn down and is just now open farmland. However, there is a cave quite close to what was once the Bell Farm, and it is believed that that cave is haunted by Kate the Witch. Now, I don't know how she got in there, but it is believed that she is haunting that cave. And they tell you when you go to visit this cave not to bring any of your own personal belongings into the cave and not to take anything out of the cave, because if you do, you will experience extreme unfortune in your life. But guys, that's really all that I have for you on today's video. I do apologize if I'm seeming a little bit nasally or like tongue-tied throughout this video. I didn't realize until I started filming that I am quite stuffed up. So I was having a little bit of trouble talking, so I do apologize for that. But if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!